friends and learners, welcome to Indian Medico. Today our topic of discussion is receptors for hormones. Receptor is a complex protein structure which, by attaching with hormone or ligand, manifests the cellular function of that particular hormone or ligand. So about the receptor, there are certain type of receptors like cell membrane receptor, which is bound to the cell membrane and manifests their function through a transmembrane or intracellular part of that receptor. And they can be intracellular receptor also. Intracellular may be intracytoplasmic receptor or internuclear receptor. You just need to remember two things. One is protein hormone or ligand will attach with the cell membrane receptor, and internuclear receptor is only for vitamin A, D and thyroxine group. Rest all of the lipid soluble hormone or amino acids hormone will act through the intracytoplasmic receptors. Now cell membrane receptor. Cell membrane receptor can be GPCR, means G protein coupled receptor, tyrosine kinase receptor, JAK-STAT receptor or serine threonine kinase receptor. Among the GPCR, there are certain subtype of GPCR like S stimulating type, which increases the cyclic AMP level, I type or inhibitory type, which decreases the cyclic AMP level, Q type, which activates the phospholipase C, which degrades phosphoinositol diphosphate into inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol. This inositol triphosphate will increase the calcium by acting on a channel which is present in endoplasmic reticulum. I will discuss this shortly. And diacylglycerol will activate protein kinase C. This will further increases some enzyme activity by phosphorylating those enzymes. And T subtype of GPCR is transducin, which mainly present in rod photoreceptor in our retina, which helps in vision, mainly white and black vision or dim light vision. And the intracytoplasmic receptor, like for testosterone, estrogen, glucocorticoid, I will discuss about this also. And internuclear receptor for vitamin A, D and thyroxine, this will be discussed in later portion. Now let's discuss about the GPCRs. GPCR or G protein coupled receptor, this is also sometimes called as 7 helix receptors or serpentine receptor. The reason behind this is this GPCR protein actually goes through the cell membrane as a single protein by 7 times. And it ultimately attaches with 3 subunit alpha, beta and gamma. Among this, alpha has the GTPase activity, means it primarily binds with a GDP, guanosine diphosphate, and with the help of inorganic phosphate, this will convert this GDP into GTP. And this GTP and alpha, which is attached each other, become separated from beta and gamma subunit. So this alpha GTP will activate different type of enzymes present in the cell membrane inner side. For GS subtype of GPCR, this alpha GTP will activate adenyl cyclase. This adenyl cyclase, this name suggests that it will form cyclic adenosine monophosphate from ATP by releasing 2 inorganic phosphate. This cyclic AMP will further activate protein kinase A. A. So if any hormones or ligand attaches with the GPCR GPCR S subtype or stimulating subtype, this alpha GTP will released, and this alpha GTP will activate adenyl cyclase. This will further activate ATP into cyclic GMP, and cyclic GMP will activate protein kinase A, and this protein kinase A will manifest different types of action. For example, in smooth muscle, this protein kinase A will phosphorylate the myosin light chain phosphatase, and phosphatase means it will separate phosphate from this myosin light chain protein, and it will also dephosphorylate myosin light chain kinase. So this combination tells that myosin light chain will be dephosphorylated, and this dephosphorylation will ultimately result in muscle relaxation, particularly smooth muscle relaxation. So any hormones or ligand like adrenaline or noradrenaline, if they act on the beta 2 receptor, which is nothing but a type of GS subtype of GPCR, this will lead to smooth muscle relaxation. One example is beta 2 receptor present in bronchial smooth muscle, and this activation of beta 2 by adrenaline or noradrenaline or by some drugs like salbutamol or terbutaline, this will cause relaxation of bronchial smooth muscle. Also, there is another beta 2 agonist which is known as isoxazoline, which causes uterine muscle relaxation by same mechanism. And beta 1 subtype is also type of GS GPCR. This type of receptor for beta 1 only is present mainly in cardiac muscles, and in cardiac muscle this protein kinase A will activate calcium channel. It will phosphorylate calcium channel, and phosphorylated calcium channel is mainly in open state. More influx of calcium into the cell will happen, and this influx of calcium will cause more cardiac contraction. Thus beta 1 causes more cardiac contraction, more inotropic effect by increasing the calcium influx inside the cardiac muscle through GPCR GS subtype by activating protein kinase A. In skeletal muscle, contraction of skeletal muscle is also by same mechanism, but it mainly happens through the beta 2 receptors. Now let's talk about M2 and M4 type of muscarinic receptor, which acts by GI subtype. GI is inhibitory, so it will decrease cyclic AMP, it will decrease activity of protein kinase A, and this decreased protein kinase A ultimately leads to opening of potassium channel. Here one thing, protein kinase A phosphorylate potassium channel, and phosphorylated potassium channel is usually in closed state. So opening of potassium channel will happen if there is less protein kinase A or less cyclic AMP. So opening of potassium channel means more potassium will go out of the cell, and this cell will go into hyperpolarization, and this hyperpolarization means the cell will be in relaxed state. So cardiac muscle will become relaxed by M2 or M4 receptor through GI subtype of GPCR. Here is one clinical importance. This GS subtype has alpha stimulating protein. This alpha stimulating protein is stimulated by cholera toxin, and this cholera toxin will stimulate alpha S protein of intestinal epithelial GPCR receptor. Intestinal epithelial GPCR. This alpha S will stimulating type of alpha subunit of GPCR will continuously activate adenyl cyclase. This adenyl cyclase will produce more cyclic AMP, and this cyclic AMP will produce more phosphoprotein kinase A. This protein kinase A will phosphorylate CFTR protein, CFTR channel or transporter, cystic fibrosis regulated protein. This will lead to more efflux of chlorine inside the intestinal lumen. And this chlorine will also drag water with it. This will lead to watery diarrhea in cholera. And next subtype of GPCR is GQ subtype. GQ subtype is a little different. In GQ subtype, this alpha GTP will activate enzyme which is called phospholipase C. This phospholipase C will cause hydrolysis of phosphoinositol diphosphate, which is mainly present in the inner cell membrane. This phosphoinositol diphosphate will be converted into IP3, it means inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol. This inositol triphosphate will act on endoplasmic reticulum transporter protein, which helps in transporting calcium from endoplasmic reticulum to cytoplasm. And diacylglycerol will activate another protein which is called protein kinase C, and this increased calcium will help in contraction like vasoconstriction, like contraction of other smooth muscles, and secretion by exocytosis. And this calcium also stimulate production of more nitric oxide or NO from endothelium, which lead to vasodilation. The effect of vasoconstriction and vasodilation by this increased calcium in blood vessels ultimately results in more vasodilation. The vasodilation component is more predominant than vasoconstriction. And this protein kinase C will activate different types of enzymes and protein or phosphorylate different types of proteins and enzymes, which ultimately lead to functional manifestation of this ligand or hormones which stimulate the GQ subtype of GPCR. What are the hormones? This can be stimulated by adrenaline or noradrenaline by alpha 1 receptor. Sorry for the interruption. So we are discussing about the hormones which act through the GQ subtype of GPCR, like adrenaline, noradrenaline through alpha 1 receptors. There are another group of hormones like vasopressin or ADH, which acts through V1 receptor into the blood vessels and causes vasoconstriction. Another group is oxytocin. Oxytocin also acts through GQ subtype of GPCR, which increases the calcium inside the uterine muscles, and this will lead to increased uterine contraction. One another subtype of G protein coupled receptor is G alpha T, and this T indicate transducin. This name came from transduction of light energy to chemical energy or electrical energy. This happens mainly in the rod cell of retina, where increases cyclic GMP by guanyl cyclase enzyme causes increased production of cyclic GMP by hydrolyzing GTP. And this activation of guanyl cyclase is done by rhodopsin, which is mainly happens in more stimulation of rod cell pigment by light wave. Another sites for alpha T subtype of GPCR is kidney and blood vessels. And activation of alpha T in kidney and blood vessels by atrial natriuretic peptide. This atrial natriuretic peptide increased in case of cardiac failure or heart failure due to stretching of atrial muscle. From the atrium, ANP is produced. This ANP will cause activation of alpha T subtype of GPCR in kidney and blood vessel. This will cause vasodilation and increase urine production or urine output. This will lead to decrease in plasma volume or relative decrease in plasma volume or decrease pressure on right atrium. So this is one of the major protective mechanism in cardiac failure.